Here we go. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, I got it.
Go, Rick.
So on this beautiful Southern California day, there were about 100 people at the drop zone. We call it a drop zone. It's the skydiving center. This was Elsinore Skydiving Center. And it is a beautiful place. The Ortega Mountain Range is in the background. The lake is in the distance. The sky was pure blue with a few scattered clouds. And like I said, there were about 100 people there. And among those 100 people were our group. We gathered together around a picnic bench, and we're just talking bullshit skydiving stories. And Paula walks up to us and says, "Let's get manifested." And everyone says, "Okay, all right, that's good." And she steps right in, splits the roughly 12 of us up into two groups. One with Billy, and his was a eight-person group. We call it an 8-way. And hers was a 4-way group, 4 people. And we began to dirt dive. Now we call it dirt diving because we practice on the ground, on the dirt, what we're going to do in the air. And so Paula's group went off to the side and started dirt diving. My group, I was in the 4-way group with Billy. We practiced the points that we were going to turn. Those are the individual formations that we're going to do from exiting the plane to opening our parachutes. In free fall, we're going to take certain grips, certain arm or leg grips, and then transition to another set of arm and leg grips, kind of like a dance in the sky. When we finished that, and Paula went up to manifest, gathered up the tickets, went to manifest, got us on the next plane. About 10 minutes before the next plane, everyone showed up at the loading area in gear. And we walked through each of our skydives once again. Everybody gave each other pin checks, gear checks, to make sure that all the pins were seated correctly and all the handles were where they should be. And then we started to board the plane. And Paula also orchestrated that. Paula's my wife, by the way. Paula also orchestrated that. And we load people on the plane in the opposite order that they'll be exiting. So the school, the tandems that were going up on this load went in first because they'd be the last to exit. And then the 4-way group, my group, and then Paula's group, the 8-way group. And we get in the airplane, they fire up the twin turbine engines, and we roar down the runway. I got to tell you, the ride to altitude is one of the best things about skydiving, because there's this sense of enormous power lifting you off of the runway, flying you up into the sky through these beautiful cumulus clouds. I'm fairly close to the door. The door is open. It's a beautiful day. We're looking out, I'm looking out, and I'm seeing these clouds go by. And I think to myself, boy, I could be home watching golf on TV. So we get to altitude, about 12,500 feet, and we're on jump run. Somebody in the front of the plane yells, 3 minutes. We all stand up in the plane, take, fold a bench on one side of the airplane up and secure it to the side so there's room for people to mill about. We're all standing up. We're preparing to exit. A red light comes on. Somebody yells, door, and the door gets flung open, cold air rushing in. And Paula looks out of the door and down, looking for aircraft, making sure that we're not going to jump right onto an airplane somewhere. And about then, the green light comes on. I yell, exit, exit, exit. Paula's group climbs out. Paula's a floater. That means that she's hanging on the outside of the plane, holding on to a hang bar, along with two of her other members of her team. And the rest of them are pressed up against them on the inside of the airplane. And Paula does a shake and a nod and a ready, set, go, and they're gone. They're all gone, all 8 of them. Woof, out of the plane, disappeared. I'm in the next group. I look out the door and I can see Paula's group falling away, becoming small, falling away, already entering that first point that they had practiced. I count to about 5, climb out. I'm a floater too. And another person next to me, 2 people inside, and Billy yells, ready, set, go, and we're gone. We immediately are in free fall. There's 120-mile-an-hour wind blowing up in our faces and holding us up. We're hovering in midair with each other and doing our points. It was a fun skydive. We did 8 points on that skydive. And I was just about ready to go to the 9th point when my audio altimeter goes off in my ear. That tells me it's time to stop playing. So we all turn, fly away from each other, still in free fall. It's called tracking. We make room from each other so that when we open our parachutes, we won't run into each other. And my audio altimeter goes off again. Deet, deet, deet. I look at my altimeter, 4,000 feet, time to pull. Throw out my pilot chute, parachute opens, gets quiet. 120-mile-an-hour wind to no wind. It's quiet. I look around, make sure I can see all of the other parachutes in my group. I look down and I see the parachutes from Paula's group. And they're about 1,000 feet or so. And as I'm watching, I see Paula turn on final with Brian, one of her teammates, on a parallel approach. They both turn on to final. And from Paula's point of view, there's a flash of parachute on her left, and somebody has just flown in front of her, cut her off, and Paula buries a right toggle to swerve away from him. What she sees next are Brian's lines going across her face. Jeez. And they wrap around her neck. And Brian's parachute collapses. And they begin to spiral down. All Paula can do is put her hands between her neck and the lines to avoid being strangled. From my point of view, I see this transpire. I see Paula turn away from the rogue skydiver and run right into Brian's lines, fly right through the lines. And they begin to spiral immediately. Both parachutes partially collapsed. Brian looks up at Paula and realizes, I can't cut away. We are too low. They're about 300 feet at this point. I can't cut away because I won't have time for my reserve to open. Paula looks down at him and thinks, should I cut away? No, I can't even move my hands. They're stopping me from choking to death. And there's just nothing I can do. At that moment, Paula hears a bang, a loud bang. From my point of view, I see them spiral into the ground and a puff of dirt. And then the DZ truck coming out from the packing area and people running from the DZ toward where Paula and Brian are. I bury a right toggle and spiral down as fast as I possibly can to see if she's okay. And I land right next to her. By then, a friend of ours a nurse is attending to Paula. Paula's neck is bleeding, but she's conscious and speaking. And I say, "Are you all right?" And she says, "Yes, my ankle hurts." And over there, Brian is being attended to by someone else, speaking softly to Brian. About that time, the ambulance, you can hear the ambulance coming, and it approaches very fast. They're out and attending to both Paula and Brian in moments. They put both of them on a gurney, put them in the ambulance, and leave. I get a ride to the hospital. And after a short wait, I find out that Brian is okay. He has a compressed vertebra from landing on his feet. And Paula has a broken ankle, and the line burns are superficial, but she has a scar around her neck to this day. They're both going to be okay, and they both recover 100%. And the moral to this story is, well, that both skydivers did the one thing that saved their life, and that was nothing. Had they, either of them, done anything at all, they probably wouldn't be with us. But they did the right thing. And they did it because they analyzed it, because they had experience, because doing nothing was the right thing.
Great story, man. Gripping, Rick.
Yeah. All right, who's next?
I'll take a stab at it, Dave.
All right.
Yeah, this one's a little different. It's just kind of from a different approach.
Now tell us if he made it inside 5 minutes.
The answer
Oh,
is
did I?
no. It was I when I started looking at it, you'd spoken for a few minutes, and it was 10 minutes after a few minutes, so probably 13 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, it seemed quicker.
Yeah, it always seems.
That's all right.
That's a great story, Rick.
We
And
were-
it certainly was quicker when it really was happening.
No way to do a 5-minute story.
We were fully engaged all through it.
Well,
Yeah.
we can be.
Although I want to take you to acting class and get you to stop saying and I'll have it.
Good thing that
I'll give you the lecture someday.
yeah, I should have learned that from Toastmasters, and at one point I had mastered that, but it seems to have crept back in my speech.
Well, I'll give you the short version. If you pause and you don't fill that pause, and that's what the is called. That's called a filled pause.
Sure.
It looks like you're choosing the next word very carefully, and it makes you look really smart. But if you go it looks like you don't know what you're trying to say next time, and it doesn't make you look very smart. That's the short version of the lecture.
All right. Cool, Don. Awesome.
All right, give it a go there, Paul.
Yeah, sure will. Okay, this one I thought about a little bit, and this one is not as dramatic, I don't think, as Rick's was, but years ago, well, my father-in-law, Benito, he was from Italy. He was really an interesting guy. He was a tailor to the stars, if you will. He's from Las Vegas, or was born in Italy during the war, and then he moved to Las Vegas in the 50s. And he was a custom tailor to Dean Martin and Sinatra and Betty Grable and so forth. He was a wonderful guy. And of course, he was in Las Vegas during the heyday, in the 50s and 60s. And the Rat Pack, and Sammy Davis was one of his clients. And he was just a great guy, and he had one of those kind of houses on the Las Vegas Country Club, which was like the house from Casino, where Robert De Niro was. It was one of those 1950s type architectural structures. And so anyway, yeah, he was a terrific guy. And back in the early 90s, my wife and I, his daughter Graciela, we were out there for about a year. I was in between assignments, and so we were staying with him. He was quite getting ill, and so we stayed with him for a while, and we got to know him a lot. I mean, I got to know him a lot better. But anyways, it was hilarious because I remember he had a 1968 Camaro, and he used to call it my Camaro. And so Graciela, his daughter would go, Papa, every time you go out at night, make sure when you come home to please dial us and tell us that you came home safely. So, he would go out from time to time with his friends, Phil Arcee or whoever they were. And these guys had known each other since the 50s. And it was, so I remember it was always like kind of a white knuckler at night when you're like going, it's Papa home, this and that. And you hear the phone number, and I'd see it on my mobile phone. It was 702-735-4837. And I go, Papa. He goes, Pablo, it's Benito. I'm at home. And then you give it to Graciela. He goes, Buonasera, signora, signorina. So we go, rest easy that he was back home. So anyways, a few years later, he passed away. And we had him cremated, and we took we had his ashes in an urn, and we had it at our house for a few years. And but he always wanted. He was from Valinfreda. It was a small town up in the mountains north of Rome. It was about an hour north of Rome. And he told us, he asked us before he passed away. He said, will you guys please make sure to inter me, back home in Valinfreda? That's where, they have a crypt there where his family's from, and his mother and father and brothers and so forth. He was the youngest. And so, we said, okay, yeah, we will. A couple of years went by, and finally we decided, yeah, let's take Papa home. So we'll, so we had his ashes in the urn, and we flew back to Roma, and we stayed at our favorite hotel in Roma called in Piazza Navona. It was really nice, and so we got there. It was early in the morning, and then about midday or early afternoon, Graciela's cousin Daniele stopped by and picked us up, and we drove up to Valinfreda. So we got up there, and it was wintertime, and it was cold, a little bit of snow on the ground. And we went to the family crypt, and we had his picture and the urn, and we walked in the cemetery, and it's how it is there. I mean, it's really ancient and so much history, and a small little medieval town, and it was quite a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't say too cold, but it was cold enough. And so we walked into the crypt, and Graciela goes, okay. So we walked in, and it was quite moving. I mean, we put the Graciela put the urn, there on the little altar, and said, when, said, well, Papa, you're home now. And she said, buonasera, so she put him down. And, we kind of were lost in our thoughts for a minute. Then we locked the gate to the little crypt. We got back in the car, and we were driving down the hill to back to Rome, and we got to the Autostrada, the highway. And we were driving there, and it was real quiet in the car. We were thinking of, remembering all the wonderful memories. And at that moment, my mobile phone rang, and I looked at it, 702-735-4837. And I have not, it was Benito's number. And I picked it up, and I go, Papa. It was nobody on the other line. I showed it to Graciela, and she started to cry. And then she goes, well, he just made it better to make sure to tell us he made it home. And that was an incredible story. It was as true as it can be. And all my wife said was, well, buonasera, Papa. And that was it. So I don't know how to describe it. It was amazing. Daniela, her cousin, was driving, started to cry. I think it's Papa, but I think he's trying to tell us something. But I think all he was saying was, I made it home.
Very
So
nice. Very nice.
Well done.
thanks, guys. Yeah, well, I miss him very much. He was a wonderful guy. He did say one thing. I'll tell you guys, I should really to give a little bit of color about him that you'd love very much. He was a terrific guy. He goes, I go that. He goes, Dino Martin, he was a good friend of mine. I used to make a lot of suits for him. And he goes, but he goes, that Frank Sinatra, he always used to go with my competition. I go, gosh, he was a great, great guy. So yeah, it was a wonderful story.
Very good. Yeah, good ending. Good ending.
Okay.
So, Brian, let me unmute. So, unmute you there.
Ryan's muted.
Yeah. Sometimes there's noise of people moving around, so I'll mute people if it's.
Still
No.
muted.
Yeah, you have to unmute it there, Brian.
Try Alt A.
That sounded it.
Okay,
There you go. There you go.
all right. I was pushing it on my thing. Yeah, I'll go if
Okay.
don't mind. Yeah. So it was about 5 or 6 months after my wife had passed away, and it was early spring in the desert. Sleeping with the windows open, just letting this very cool, dry air come in and kind of refresh the house. Sleeping soundly, still getting used to sleeping alone in a big house, in a big bed. And something woke me up all of a sudden, and I realized immediately what the sound was. It was the sound of car tires crunching on the gravel coming down my driveway. I sat up and looked, and I saw these headlights coming down my little gravel lane in front of my house. And I glanced at the clock, and it was 3 a.m. And I live in a very remote place, in a remote ranch. I'm at the end of the last lane in this remote ranch, and so it's a hard place to find by accident. But so there's cars coming, and I think to myself, this isn't right, And so the car pulled in, and it parked at kind of a strange angle. The people that are familiar with me or know me just wouldn't park the way this guy parked, kind of parallel to my house. And so I'm looking, and a door opens, and a guy gets down. And he's probably about 70 feet out there, I guess. And so I quickly slip on a pair of sweat bottoms. And my dad, all of my life, my dad had slept next to this big gun he had in a cabinet in our house, and I was in Baker, and it was always loaded, and we always knew it. And so now I was sleeping next to this big gun, and I put my pants on, and I took this gun out of the cabinet, and I'm holding it and just watching. And this guy starts walking toward my house, and I'm like, kind of did a reality check. Am I fully awake? Is this really happening? And am I holding a loaded gun? What am I going to do here? And I realized I was really scared. I was really frightened. And so now he's walking, and he's walking slowly toward my front door, and he's about 60 feet out there now. And I decide, I don't turn any lights on, but I quietly go around, and I'm standing to my front door, and he's still kind of coming. He's about 50 feet out there, and I'm watching him, and the other passenger side door opens, an interior light goes on. I can see another guy. And now he stands up and just stands by the car. The interior light's on. So I'm thinking, okay, 2 men. What are they doing? What are they doing? What am I doing? And I was really frightened, and trying to analyze it and figure out a plan. So he's 50 feet out now and keep walking. And I'm thinking, maybe I'll just sit here in the darkness. If he knocked, I just won't answer the door. But my front door is unlocked. I don't lock up because I just don't need to out there. But he could just turn the handle and come in. And so he's like 40 feet out there, and I'm watching him through this window, and I'm thinking, I've got several back doors in my house. I can just run out the back door, one of the back doors, and sneak around the side. Then I quickly think, well, number one, that's, I'm going to be out in the desert half naked with no shoes on in the thorny ground. And this guy comes up, maybe I'll have one guy inside my house, one guy outside my house. I don't know what's going on. And this guy just continues to walk up slowly toward my house. And at about 30 feet or so, I decided I don't want this guy in my house, and I don't want to let him get up close to me. Because if God forbid, if the gun comes into play, I don't want him to get a chance to grab it. And so when he's about 20 feet out, I flip on the porch light and I yank the door open, and I just stood there. And I had this big gun in my left hand and the door in my right hand. And I didn't pull it up and point it at him, but I had it down a little bit out from my side. I wanted him to be able to clearly see what it was, that it wasn't a cell phone or it wasn't a flashlight. It was a gun. And it's a 38, revolver 6-shooter, a John Wayne gun, if you want to think of it that way. And there's no mistaking it. So I did that, and I stood there, and the guy froze. He just stopped in his tracks. And like in about a second or two, I pretty much knew I was going to be okay, because he stopped and he kind of he didn't raise his hands up like this, but he sort of put them out to his side with his palms down and his fingers splayed so I could now see his hand. He didn't have anything, as if he was saying like, whoa, whoa. And he looked really startled, like, why in the world would a guy at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere answer his door with a gun? And behind him over his shoulder, I see the other guy in the car. He must have seen it too, or realized something's up, because he quickly jumps into the car and shuts the door, and interior light goes off. So I'm thinking, okay, good. I know where he is at least, right? And so this guy, and he's only about 20 feet away from me. And emotionally, I realized all of a sudden my meter was going from being scared, because I was now in control of the situation pretty much. So I started to get a little bit angry, and I thought, oh man, I got to tamp that down. This is not good, So I kind of tried to get that, and I just stood there for a second, and I said, what do you want? And I tried to keep my voice really neutral, although I was kind of scared and kind of mad. And he said, we were wanting to get something out of your gift shop. I wondered if your store was open. And I said,
Right.
At 3 a.m, I said, the store's closed. You need to turn around and get out of here and go back the way you came. And he said, oh, okay. And he backed up a couple of steps, and then he turned around and walked to the car, and I stood there, and the car started, and I watched him. They drove out and drove up the road going out of my canyon. And then I started to giggle, because I realized what had probably happened, because this had happened 5 or 6 times before since I've been living out there, out here. In 30 miles away in Nye County, Nevada, rural Nevada, prostitution is legal. And for some reason, all the brothels are called ranches: the Bunny Ranch, the Mustang Ranch, the Moonlight Ranch. Well, I live on a historic piece of property called China Ranch. We have signs on the road. So I'm pretty sure these guys had gotten liquored up in Vegas or somewhere. They had seen the sign or found out about us, and they came out to China Ranch. And so they're expecting like some hot sex with exotic Asian women. And what they get is this, frightened, balding old guy with a big ass gun, and so, but there was one thing. I did have my shirt off. So they got a little something there, That's my story.
Have a new mission.
Yeah.
A great story.
Neon lights.
But it was, I'll tell you, there was about 2 minutes where I was really, really scared. Your mind is racing. I'm trying to make all these decisions and analyze. I mean, the last thing I want is a conflict, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let these guys rob me or kill me or do something terrible, So, yeah. So anyway, that was, I never had to pick the gun up and point it at him, but he saw it. And I, whatever ambition they have probably withered right then.
That's excellent. Okay, 10 out of 10. That's a good one.
China Ranch.
All right.
Well, I'm going to go ahead with mine here. And, the whole thing that was going through my mind with this quote assignment came up was, the whole Dia de los Muertos and remembering people. And so I thought about a guy that I think all of us knew and loved. And that was Don Duplessis. And so my story is about Don Duplessis, the man, the myth, the myth fit. So he had this way of always screwing things up. He would say things that he didn't mean to say. It was a lifelong kind of problem for him like that, and it got him in all kinds of trouble. On our end of it, as freshman students, we took advantage of that. And he would stumble through. We all loved Don, and he was a great teacher. We learned many, many good things. But for gosh sakes, we had some good laughs at the stuff that came out of his mouth. For example, Saint Augustine wished men could spawn fish. And when somebody asked him why was Thomas à Kempis buried alive, and his answer was because they didn't know he was dead. We had to think about that one. And things would come out that just seemed perfectly good to him, but we would get us roaring in laughter. One was ask Father Father Justin was a big friar.
Big man, yeah.
He was a big friar.
He was any three of us.
Yeah. At one point, he said we were talking about the councils in the early church, and he said, "Well, if you want to know about the Council of Hippo, go ask Father Justin."
Oh.
Oh.
And everybody goes, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." And so this is where this started. Maybe some of you remember this, but this was the scroll, and it goes on and on. Can you see this at all, or is it?
A little bit.
Okay, we can't read the small print, but
Is it backwards? But anyway.
no, it's
not.
clear.
It's only backwards to you, Dave.
Got it. So this was the scroll, and so just like we had fun with Millie Roach, and we try to get her to say as time goes on as a game. So our game became writing down Father Don quotes, and I've got 106 theses. That the myth fit. The man, the myth, and the myth fit. So a couple of other zingers. He said, living is not more important than denying God. So I start writing that down. This is a good one. And then he had another one. He said, unless you believe that God punishes good, you cannot enter heaven. Writing that down, like that. And it started early in his early days, because he told this story, and I had heard it several times, and we would laugh about it every time. When he was a young debonair and not a priest, and not even thinking about a priest, he had, his Susie Q was a Mexican girl with a traditional Mexican family. So he figured he would endear himself to the family by, singing a romantic, Mexican song. And so Paul's going to get this from the very beginning. The name of the song was Adios Chaparrita Chula. So Paul right now, probably Mark right now, are going to kind of see danger zone here. Because Don, he got things mixed up. And so he was, at the same time he was, trying to learn the song, he was also taking Latin and Italian. And probably, as you know, the Italian pronunciation of CH is not a ch, it's a hard C. And so the song, it's a big scene. He's got his guitar, his beautiful senoritas, waiting for, and the dad, the traditional dad, the traditional mother are just, just entranced. He's going to sing you a song, Mija. And so Don starts out, Adios, chaparrita, cula. So cula in Spanish is ass.
Yeah.
Is butt. So he's singing adios, short little butt.
Short ass.
So at that moment, he realized he was destined to be a priest. That's the story. But talking about Latin misfortunes with the Latin language. So he told me another story of when he was off visiting Italy. So he wanted to impress the natives with his command of the the Italian. He didn't know much Italian, but he figured at least he could say hello and goodbye. But so he wanted to say, I welcome you with open arms. Benvenuto, brachiae cum. What's with, Paul? With
Yeah.
Whatever.
So when-
Brachia aperta. What he was trying to say was he's trying to say, I greet you with open arms, and everybody, the people just kind of go, all the men in the group are kind of giggling, and the women are
Oh,
just aghast. And he said, this is not the reaction. What did I just say? And they're giving us this. I come to you with an open fly.
yeah.
Oh,
God was speaking to him.
A woman I used to work with said, if you really want to travel through Europe, whatever language you're working in, you need to learn to say, I'm an ignorant American who will admit it. Do you have time to help me?
Well, so we had some good laughs with Don. We learned some things. He had some good lessons to learn. He taught us. I was grateful for that. But that wasn't the end of it. When we graduated, many of you will remember the great destructos that we had turned into poker night. And so, and Don was invited, and for a couple of times we had it at he was the priest at the Newman Center at Fullerton. So we'd go in the big the room where they had mass and everything like that. We'd be dealing cards and smoking crooks and drinking and everything like that. And, at a certain we start with 5-card draw, and then we go to 5-card stud, and then we do spit in the sea, and we kept getting wilder till we finally, when we were drunk enough and smoked enough and silly enough, and we play Indian poker. Of course, everybody knows how Indian poker is, and so
Right.
yeah. So everybody gets. You start out with one card, and everybody gets the card face down, like that, and then at the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, you put the card on your head like that, and everybody would be looking around at everybody else, and trying to judge by their reaction, by their, what kind of card, So Don, he had that funny kind of, he'd be like a fish kind of bubbling, and he'd be looking at everybody's cards, and so. He was so funny, and it was so much fun. So then we progressed to, when we got tired of that, another couple of beers after that, it was time for Indian chief poker. And here's Don. And so everybody can see his hands, so he's going to be like the big guy and say, okay, I'll see your 5 and I'll raise you 10. We're all dying because he's just got this really bonehead card, thing that he's, so, that was a pretty good time. As it turned out, he was the Friar Tuck of the Merry Man, Robin Hood and the Merry Man, and he married a lot of us. I know he was officiated in our wedding, and and Paul as well.
Yeah, he baptized all of our children. Yeah.
And same thing, he baptized our first child was born. Anna was born in Illinois, and he showed up. He got on a plane. And we had a big sign that said "Welcome, Pilgrim Padre," and had a drawing of him with a Schlitz beer that I could dig up. But so he came and did the baptism, which was wonderful. What a guy! To fly across the country. He baptized the other kids, and there's a funny story because when he was at the baptism for, I think it was Adrian, the third kid. He was, the bunch of people were there and everything, and family, and he said, I baptized, Anna, I baptized Gabriel and Anna, and Gabriel, who was about 4 years old, pipes up, raises his hand, and says, "Yeah, it didn't work." Anna's baptism didn't work, so he laughed so hard, it didn't work.
The greatest guy, no doubt. He actually, remember, Dave, you were there when my mom died. He gave the eulogy. He celebrated mass, and he gave the eulogy for mom. He was such a wonderful guy, a great friend all these years.
So, and it just continued through my whole adult life. I remember this one great moment. So it was my 10th anniversary. And Don would call our anniversary was the 18th of December. It was exactly a week before Christmas. Easy to remember that way. And he would always be on the phone wishing us a happy anniversary. He'd always call me June 21st, wish me happy birthday. And the back end of it, I would call him on his birthday, which was August, I believe it was 6th. It was close to my dad's birthday. And also the day of his ordination, which was easy to remember because it was St. Patrick's Day. March 17th. So, at least twice a year we get on the phone, we talk, well, 4 times because it went both ways for years, pretty much, my whole adult life. But the 10th anniversary was something special. And I always felt that we were a special couple to him because, having gone across country and staying closely as touch, he came and stayed with us in San Francisco when we were in dental school. We had a great time in San Francisco, so we were in Yuba City, 10th anniversary. I wanted to surprise my wife. So Maria actually was working in a dental office like that. So she was gone all day. And so while she's gone, we had this whole thing. I went to the airport, picked up Father Don, drove back to the house, and he started cooking New Orleans gumbo, Cajun gumbo. And so it's this okra gumbo, this family recipe. He's this Duplessis are from the New Orleans area. That's the French name. And so we got okra, we got the shrimp, we got the the sausage, everything. And we still to this day that's a big treat. We know how to cook it. We learned it from Father Don. We do Father Don's Don Duplessis Creole cooking.
Nice.
Oak gumbo. So anyway, so that was part of it. Was cooking the meal. But the other part of it, we kind of did this up well. So Maria was at work, and so I went in the back bedroom. I laid out a nice dress, the prettiest dress she had. I dressed myself in a I was in the Air Force. I had my mess dress, as you would know, Mark, and it was basically a tuxedo. I looked pretty sharp. And so the kids, Anna, who was like 6 years old, and Gabe, who was like 4 years old, were the waiters. They had the little bow tie, little white shirt, a tie, and Gabe had a towel over his arm, like a little waiter and stuff like that. And so anyway, so I have Maria come in the back way. I said, "Oh, we're going to go out for a date. We're going to celebrate our thing. So she's all excited. And this is kind of mysterious. What this is like." So anyway, so instead of taking her out, I said we started walking down the hallway, and we took a quick left turn into the living room where it was all set out. Candles, the dishes, like that. And right on cue, Father Don comes out with an accordion player. We had found an accordion player, and he sang the anniversary song, and so we have photos of it. I'll see if I can dig them up and send you. But what a guy! And so every time we have okra gumbo, we think of him. And he would tell this funny story, about how he touched so many people's lives. Students would come to him, people he didn't really know all that well. It would be when he was in Orange County, it would be a very common thing that would happen. Somebody would tug on his, shirt, "Hey, Father Don, you remember me?" And he would say, "Are you?" He says, No, I'm Joe. "Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I can't remember. He didn't have the greatest memory for facing. He probably had like 10 years worth of students and stuff. So one time this student, kind of, "Hey, Father Don, you remember me?" And he said, "Well, no, who are you?" He said, "Oh, my name is Joe." "Oh, well, nice to see you, Joe." He says, "Well, good to see you, And Father Don, I want to tell you something. There is something that you said 10 years, 25 years ago that I thought about, and I think, man, this was really, really something that I learned from you." And so, Father Don gets all kind of happy and everything like that. He's like his life has had some purpose, and he's put some kid on the right path with his wisdom and stuff like that. And he says, "Oh, and what was that?" He said, "Father, you told me once that, a man could smile and smile and smile and still be a liar." And so Father Don goes from to that look, you get this little pouty, that fat lip on the kind of.
The dupe.
Yeah,
It was awesome.
yeah. So So, but he must have told me that story at least 5 or 6 times because he would always laugh. He'd just be laughing so hard when he told his story. And it was just kind of this whole kind of attitude that he could laugh at himself, and he didn't take himself seriously. It was that same story that I think I told on the credit talks. Everybody's goofing off, and he just comes and slams the door. It's like it stares everybody down, takes a step in, and his cloak is stuck in the door. And then he shakes. His lip goes out. He has to extricate his cassock from the door, and the class is now laughing, uproariously, and he has to laugh at himself. Yeah, but there was one thing that he said, and I just thought of it last night. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's when I do my best work. I was awake, I was in bed, and this thought hit me. This thing that he taught me that has been probably the most valuable. It's better than even you can smile and smile and smile. Better than that one even. And what he taught us, and I think people will remember this, is that love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. And it makes all the difference, because if love is a choice, it's a matter of will, and you get to decide to keep loving, even if you don't feel like it. You can love, and words of wisdom, and I believe it. I believe love is a choice, and it's helped me, love, and even when it's hard to do, you can. So that was the thing that I'm very grateful for him. So. God bless.
God bless him. He was wonderful. Yeah.
Don't even want to see how many minutes that was. So
I was just about to call you on that.
Yeah.
So Don Taco, you've got open-ended. So I hope you've got.
Well, I was trying to think of topical things. Let's see if I can remember how all the pieces fell into this. I'm the oldest of 6.
The dog on the bicycle was a short story.
Yes.
And no coaxing.
I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and we're spaced like 2 years apart, like volumes of an encyclopedia. It's almost regular, which, considering that they were devout Catholics and incredibly randy people, was probably pretty amazing for my parents to have had 6 in the time period. On the other hand, my mother's first pregnancy didn't come to term and was a stillbirth, and one of my sisters, both of my sisters, but one of them seriously, was warned that she shouldn't have children because of health complications, and she had 3 anyway, each one more dangerous than the last. So there are probably things in the family that there were genetic difficulties. So it may be an amazing feat that they were able to have so many children safely in that period of time. We, well before any of us were old enough to be babysitters, we were all dropped off at the Fox Fullerton to go to the movies on Sunday evening, so they could have some time with no children. So my fast forward years, they got, well, let's back up. They did some temperature testing, big science news at the time thing, and got invested in the rhythm method, which was the only contraceptive thing that was acceptable to Catholics at the time, and managed to go 4 years with no children after the youngest of the 6. So that was the thing that was working. But then my father got ill. So jump forward. my father died when I was 13, almost 14. He died 10 or 15 minutes till midnight before my youngest brother's birthday. And my mother said all the rest of her life he was just too much of a gentleman. Knew it was coming to die on his son's birthday, so he let it go. They called him for the hospital and said, "We think it's really bad. He's breathing easy. And with the troubles he's having, that's not right." So she got to the hospital and he passed. So then we jump forward many years. And my clan, and I choose that word very carefully, gets together every 3 years, has a big family reunion. There may be 80 to 100 people at it, or very rarely less than 40. And it's a very tight-knit group. One of these events, a few decades ago now, all of my siblings and my mother, because we scattered, we live all over the country, and we went to colleges at all different places, and all 7 of us are in a hotel room late at night at one of these events for the first time in many, many, many years. We've all seen each other regularly, but we haven't all 7 been together for a very long time. And we get to looking back through decades to my father's death, and telling and bringing up what we remember. And it was the first time for me that I ever realized that the things I remember have more depth because I was older and more understanding and more things that stuck, because the 4-year-old doesn't remember Dad much. The 6-year-old a little more, the 8 and on up through the things and the events even related to the death, which is what we were discussing, are sketchier for each of this. And some of the people only really remember like the stories that the older ones have told or that my mother told, and looking back on it. And we've spent an whole evening like rehashing things. And you know how storytellers are, or joke tellers, you say something and something clicks and you say, oh, that reminds me of, and so all this stuff is going on. But I'm saying, wow, Stephen remembers almost nothing, and David less. And so it was, for me, it was an eye-opening event in some ways. And as we told all these stories and dredged up all the memories we could, my mother was chipping in a little bit here and there, but mostly just taking it all in. And and at some point, as the reminiscing calmed down, she said, it was apparently an eye-opening event for her. She said, this has always been something terrible that happened to me, and I have never realized that it happened to all of you in such obviously deep ways that it's just never crossed my mind before in a way that I'm seeing tonight. So it was a really telling event. So I'll tell you one of the stories. St. Jude's Hospital, where Dad was sick, didn't allow children. You had to be 18 years old to enter the hospital.
Remember that.
And my mother would have nothing to do with that. And she was also, and many of you know her or knew her, she was very tolerant of ignorance and stupidity and people trying to tell her what she could or couldn't do. So she told us when we went to visit, you hold hands in pairs, oldest and youngest, and paired. And if somebody says, you have to be 18 to be in here, we would look at each other, glance at the other person in the pair holding hands and say, we are 18, because we were 14 and 4, or 12 and 6, or 10 and 8. And our instructions were to just continue about our business. You know, we were going to visit Dad, and we would just head on down the hall. And if someone like tried to challenge that, then it was like, you know, the mama lion defending her cubs. She'd get between us, and we would go to we would just continue to the room, and she would guard the way and take on. It's like, you know, okay, you want to stop my children, first you have to deal with me. And mostly these people weren't invested in the rules, and they didn't want to tangle with her, and they got to understand. But we there was apparently one nurse who the rules mattered more to her than, it was like she'd have let somebody die before she would have break one of the rules. And after a few encounters with my mother, when she would see us coming, she would excuse herself from her duties and go to another floor or another wing or something, to just not be any part of this rule breaking. She just would leave and get out of the way. And we would go and see our dad because he was dying, and the rules weren't going to stop us from visiting us, as far as my mother was concerned. So I told this story in amongst all of those other stories, and my mother said, "Really? I don't remember that." She had her mind on other things. There were more important things than that going on for her at that time.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice story, Don. Yeah.
Yeah, good one. So good job, everybody. Very enjoyable.
Well, we haven't heard from Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
Well, if it's too late, we can call it a night.
No, no, no.
Not too late. It's never too late.
No,
Never
we're
too
really-
late.
Too late.
I'm
Guys,
up for it.
we like hearing from you.
And if it is too late, it's David's fault.
Perfect.
And not mine for a change.
Well, okay, so I was going to tell a story very similar to Brian's, but it might be a little bit too much. It deals with knives, and maybe too much for this late at night. So I'm going to switch my story to a third person. My first brush with a near dead person and a dead person. And it takes some background. So when I was in grade school, before I met any of you, my dad, who is very German, met a Cherokee Indian individual from Oklahoma, and they became very good friends, and they started hunting together in Utah. And by the time that I was 13 and 14, they've been hunting for years. And I was headed to, and I got to know his son, the Cherokee Indian named Ray, his son named Ron, and we became very good friends. And Ron was about 2 years younger than me. Somewhere in there, Ray asked my dad for a co-signature on a loan so he could buy a shop in Big Bear, which you guys know where that is. This is a California story. So he did so, and Ray bought that shop, and it had 2 tow trucks. Well, they moved up there, and then that means that my best friend Ron moved up to Big Bear. So I used to go up there and stay with them for a couple weeks at a time. Well, when you have tow trucks, you're usually involved with the California Highway Patrol, and you wind up having to go to big accidents up there because it's twisty, windy roads. And, there's everything. People sleeping at night, people stopping on the road when they shouldn't, and then there's accidents. Well, in order for those tow trucks to move, you had to be the owner of the tow trucks or someone that's 16 years old. And I was 16 years old. But you had to have the owner's son in it. So Ron and I would get the phone call in the middle of the night to bring the second tow truck to a place where there was an accident to get the second car or the third car or whatever. So frequently as a young man, a young kid, I was going to these accidents where these cars were all mangled up. Mostly, by the time we got there, the bodies were cleaned up, but not the blood. And after a couple years of time, I began to realize that I could figure out who died where when those cars hit. And it was kind of indirectly. So going back to my dad and his buddy, they used to go hunting in Utah. When I turned 16, I went hunting with them. And as we started shooting deer and stuff, I learned through them that when you approach a deer, if his eyes are closed, he's not dead. If his eyes are open, he's dead. And you can approach him safely. Otherwise, put another bullet in him. So that stuck with me. Advance it to the point that I joined the military and I was going to my second assignment up in Washington. I was driving from California, San Diego, or Orange County, up to, well, it was San Diego, excuse me, up to Washington State on Interstate 5. On that drive, I came upon an accident between two truckers. The guy going downhill had lost his brakes, obviously, and gone into the outside lane and hit head on the other 10-wheeler. The 10-wheeler going uphill had flipped going downhill and was hanging on the rail. The truck going downhill to do that was stripped clean down to the frame. I was one of two people or three cars that arrived at the same time. And we started, there was smoke, no fire, typical diesel accident. And we started looking for the two drivers. We found in the downhill truck that I could tell had flipped downhill, pointed downhill, that the driver was in it. So we climbed up into that thing and pulled him out. And he was a sack of potatoes, literally still breathing. So we laid him on the ground. And because I had seen this since years before, said, there's another driver. So I started looking around and we spread out looking for him. And I started looking over the two wrecks. And I could tell that the guy had been spit out of his truck uphill. And I walked to that distance and went through, there was nothing but green trees up there. And I clawed my way through brush, not brush, but tree branches. And you know how pine trees are. They get thick and big at the bottom. And they're thick like 2 or 3 feet apart from each other at the trunk. And I found that guy. And he had been thrown with such velocity through those branches that his clothes had been stripped off his body down to his feet. He was completely naked, a gray white, and his head had been pushed into his shoulders. And I yelled out, "Don't look anymore, I found him." And I walked back down to the guy that we had laid on the ground. His eyes were closed and he was trying to bleed. I mean, he was in pain, obviously, he was in shock. He didn't even know he was there, trying to breathe. And everyone was, now there's a few more people and they're standing around him. And I said, he's not gonna continue breathing if we don't cut his throat open. I don't know how to do it. I seen it on the movies, and put a tube in there. Does anyone have a pen? No pen, no straw, no nothing, and a tiny little knife. And I said, we're not gonna do anything with this. So I got up. I said, the other body's up there. And I got up and they said, where are you going? And I said, I'm getting in my car and I'm leaving. There's no way to get hold of anybody that's going to save this man. I said, how? And they said, how do you know he's dead? Or how do you know he's alive? I said, his eyes aren't open. If you go right up that little trail I came down, the other guy's eyes are open. And I walked away completely calm that 2 guys had died. realizing that I had seen this in many, many deer. That's the end of the story. Well, actually, P.S. the guy died.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
Very interesting. Yeah. Traumatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Accidents happen.
Yeah.
Well, we're
We
kind
were
of,
returning up the California coast one time when I lived in Malibu, and you come around a big curve and there's a car, like a van on its side burning. And a bunch of people like stopped and standing all around it. And and you can't really get past, and we all jumped out, and there was a guy with a fire extinguisher standing about 20 feet back from it, not sure what to do. One of the guys grabbed that and went up and tried, and the driver had been thrown out of the vehicle and he looked really bad. Tried to ask him whether there were more people in it. Grabbed things like tire irons, tried all the doors, burned your fingers, couldn't break any, couldn't get any, everything was locked, couldn't get anything to open. And the meantime, the flames are continuing higher and higher. It's funny, I couldn't recall any near death things, but this popped out but we were the only people trying anything, but we were unable to do anything that helped. By the time after a few minutes, the car was engulfed in flames. Nothing was unlocked. There wasn't anybody you could even pretend to rescue. And we heard later that everyone died, including the driver.
Many people die in car accidents.
I've got
And I
a,
think it's a miracle that in 68 years, I have never seen death.
Mm.
You're lucky.
Not
You're
even one.
You're lucky, Rick.
I had a instance. It was downtown Grass Valley. They had like a Veterans Day parade, and it was there's a small town. It's a lot of fun. You see people people. The high school bands are marching, and they had this kind of a lawn tractor pulling like a little bit of a float. It was an airplane mock-up, and it was inside the airplane. There was these old vets. These guys were like in their 80s. They were paratroopers in World War II, and they had their old uniforms on. They're going down Mill Street, the main street, and they jump outside the thing, pull their lip, they got the whole, the crowd is just, wait, it's just, you know, how you feel about veterans that, did great things in those wars and survived so much trauma and so much danger and so much, the lives that they lived. And this old guy had beaming with life and happiness and doing what he did as probably a 19-year-old kid and survived. Well, I have a tractor, a lawn tractor, and I've got a steep hill. And when you go down your tractor on a steep hill, you push the brake is the same thing as the clutch. And so if you push the brake, it actually the tractor starts running faster, and you have to know to push all the way down so it's a little bit tricky. You get it eventually. Well, it turns out, so that was that parade. The next day, I read in the news that the tractor pulling the airplane went around the corner. It was a downhill. The tractor went over the plane. The plane went over, and the guy was killed. The old vet, the 80-year-old vet, was killed.
Man.
Oh, what a great parade.
Yeah, and veteran, so all the thing, and that's the crazy thing, because all the things that you survive, and then that happens. And one other vet thing, there was a guy in the hospital where I worked, and they called him mock doc, mock as in MACH, because he would do Mach 4, Mach 3, Mach 4. He was an SR-71 pilot and a doctor.
The Beale Air Force Base was the U-2 stuff, right, David?
I'm sorry?
Is it Beale Air Force Base where you were
Yes.
stationed? It's all
Yeah,
U-
but
all U-2 stuff,
they had
right?
the U, they had the U2, but they also had the
SR-71.
SR-71, SR-71, which was basically a rocket ship with wings. And Carl Haller he was a pilot, a fighter pilot over Vietnam, got shot down a couple times, bailed out both times. I think he might even have been a prisoner for a while, but he survived Vietnam, and he came back, and he was one of the few pilots, the elite pilots that got to fly the SR-71. If you look up, they have a list of SR-71 launches and the names of it. And if you look at Carl Haller III, he was like number 142 of the pilots that. It's a rocket ship with wings. What happens is when it takes off, the rocket fuel leaks all over the place because the heat of the engine expands and eventually the gas tanks eventually stop leaking. But when
Steels, yeah.
yeah, and so they've discontinued. But back then, the pilots, they would fly into Russia. They were based in Okinawa, and the Russians had nothing that could catch them. They would see a rocket coming up on their radar coming up at them. They just put on the gas and they
Yeah.
just outrun it.
Or a high altitude
Reconnaissance.
spy.
Yeah, and they had
Yeah.
these great. So anyway,
The camera platform.
so this guy was an SR-71 pilot, and then he became a doctor. I think for whatever reason he could no longer fly. So what does he do? He goes to med school,
Yeah.
and he becomes a physician.
Want to go eat with us?
Yeah, I do.
How long gonna be?
Okay.
Okay.
Guys, I'm sorry. I have to go. I'm at my daughter's house.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I'll see you next time. All right.
Great to
I
see you,
enjoyed it. I
Brian.
enjoyed all the
All
stories.
right. Bye-bye.
I gotta sign off also, guys.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, Paul, take care.
You guys take care.
So
I'm doing building maintenance for an assisted living center for the last 8 years, and people die.
let me finish. Coming up to the punchline here. So Carl Haller became a physician, the greatest guy, the most humble guy ever. He's just a real practical guy. And I remember it was Christmas time, and I was buying a Christmas tree, and the wind was blowing and blowing and blowing, and gosh, it was blowing hard. And so, like the next Monday back at work at the hospital, found out Carl Haller had died. And what had happened was he was driving in a sports car up Highway 20, and a tree went down, and the sports car went right into it.
Oh,
So here's a guy that got shot down in Vietnam, was flying this hypersonic jet, became a physician, and the wind blows a tree down, and he runs into it. But the coolest thing, and Mark, I think you would appreciate this. They had a service for him, and everybody, just people were crushed, and people said so many good things about him, and it was very moving. There's that honor among fellow officers and crew and everything, and it was a big deal, and so everybody's kind of choked up. Anyway, so I'm filing it. It was on the base in the chapel, and so it's all done. I go walking out the front door, and all of a sudden there's this sound, this sound, a hissing sound, and I look up, and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and I'm looking up, and coming right at me was an SR-71, full throttle, and just burning right at the chapel. And so, they timed it just right. It was like, I don't know, $80,000 just to launch one of these things in fuel.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And, but so just as you put your head up, this thing is coming right at you, and then it's gone, and it's like, holy, no, I didn't expect it. I don't know. I'm sure some of the pilots knew it was happening, but what a tribute to a pilot, a doctor, a great man, that we just lost because of a tree and a windy day. Another one of those crazy stories, but made a big impression. Yeah, your turn, Don.
So, we lose people. It's just is part of that life. And you know them better or worse or whatever, and they're older or younger, whatever. There's just is an incredible range. Well, I walk in one Monday morning, and first thing in, and they say, "Oh, George died." Well, George was over 100 years old, and his son told me when we were talking about it later that George had said to him, 100, that's such a landmark. I really wanted to get to that. But you know what? 100 in a day would have been enough. I'm tired of this. So he made it about 3 months past 100 years. But as I walk in Monday morning and they say, "Oh, George died. We're so sad." I said, "Oh, all right." And so, I said, "Well, I better go check out the room. Make sure there's not like food sitting around and trash and whatever, because who knows, it could be days or weeks for the family to clear out the thing. That's just a part of my job." And so I go walk into George's room, and there's George dead. It's like, oh, George just died. George didn't die on the weekend, and we're just now telling you about it because you got here. We just minutes ago discovered that George died.
George,
Hi, George.
George, I heard you're dead.
Yeah.
You're really dead?
So that was the most unusual. Often I come in Monday and they don't even tell me. It's like old news. I learned a day or two later, what happened? I came back from my trip to Colorado in September, and two of my favorite people had died.
Yeah.
One of them really unexpectedly. So just, yeah.
Well, I think this party died here. So good job, everybody. That was pretty interesting to me. And one thing that I was wondering, and it's an essay question for your heads, if not, just what's the difference between speaking and writing? What is one easier, one is harder? What do you think with this exercise? What does it make you think about writing?
Well, I wanted to ask you, where did you come up with the idea of telling stories?
Well, we had those great courses.
I was born with it. I grew up with it. That's
No,
what my clan does.
For the assignment. When you think
Yeah. There was a great storyteller that he showed a video of.
Yeah, so we purchased all these great story or these different writing things, courses, editing course, which I just finished. It was great. And so we had a oral storytelling great courses that we'd gotten years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, listened to a couple of things and kind of put it aside. So on my trip down for the reunion, I listened to a couple of those episodes. I thought, this is really good. So that's where it came from.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, I played that to.
You did play session 1 or something.
Yeah,
I remember that.
I
The
think
gal
Rick-
was talking about.
Rick was there and
somebody.
I have since looked her up on YouTube and heard some of her other stories. She's really quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how.
Yeah, she's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think that there's a big difference between telling a story and writing, and that's the main reason I'm in this Writers Anonymous platform, because I want to put stories into the book, and I was telling Rick, eventually you're going to give us enough assignments that will complete my book. I have the story.
Yeah.
Writing is a whole row of skills. There are 7 or 8 defined different types of writing, and storytelling is considered one of them. And any of them can be influenced by good storytelling skills, but one of the, but just say, when you're saying writing a story, telling a story, writing, you're taking your time and you're editing in a different way, and your storytelling oral skills require staying focused in the moment and not saying which I just did. But practicing telling stories live is really good for influencing your ability to tell a story well on paper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I can do something. I wrote that story that I told today before I told it, and I told it from memory. As I was writing it, I wrote it pretty much as if it were spoken aloud, but then visited it with lots of editing, changes of point of view. And I'll post that to our website.
Good.
So you can get an idea of the difference between what it started out as, which was written. Well, it started out as a memory. It has lived as a story from time to time because the story about Paula's collision has been set around the campfire. But for this assignment, I wrote it down, edited it, prepared it, massaged it, and then from the memory of what I said in the written story, I told the story tonight. You can see the difference, although this one is preceded by the written form instead of followed by the written form.
Yeah. I thought of writing, usually when I have to give a speech, I can just write down little phrases and it just kicks me into the next thought. It's not a list, it's phrases. And it can't be long because I don't want to read them. I want to see them and know it immediately. So 3 or 4 words and your brain will pick it up and
Sure.
off you go. And then you have a flow through the whole thing.
Yes.
But writing the story, I have to think, where am I going to connect these dots? And so I usually write the body first and then the beginning and then the end, something like that.
Yes, but don't you outline it at least in your mind before you write the body? So you're writing a speech, you're just writing it down instead of speaking it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I was going to tell the horrible experience I had that was similar to Brian's, and it's a couple of experiences. But the problem is that it's really graphic, and you don't want, I find, that when I was in a leadership followership type of relationship and someone said, I got this issue and it's threatening my family, and I'm saying, well, look, you got retirement in the bag, you're never going to face a court martial, so if you do something, make sure that your children, and I'm not a parent, but at times I feel I can backseat drive. I can say, make sure that your kids do not see what you're going to do. They can't withstand that kind of memory. You can, they can't. So don't do that. That was my only takeaway. I thought, you got to do what you got to do to protect your family, but don't do it in front of the family. Make sure that it occurs so separate from that no one will be exposed to it and stuff like that.
What are you talking?
Not the movies.
What are you talking about, Mark?
In this one case, this is one case. I had 2 guys working, one guy working for me that had 3 distinguished flying crosses. And in the military, to get a distinguished flying cross, you were a bona fide damn hero. This guy had been a parajumper, a PJ medic, where they dropped him in and he fixed up a body and he pulled people out. So they're combat rescue people. And he had been lowered into Vietnam and he'd been lowered into Cambodia, both, and had shot his way out after fixing up someone and put him on a sling to get in a helicopter. He had shot his way and killed numbers of people to get to the pickup point and been pulled out. And the third one, he got in Hawaii by being dropped into shark water, saving somebody. And he and another guy beat sharks in the head, and it was like witnessed by the helicopter crew. This guy told me, with the closed door, he says, I got a weird guy, ex-con, living next door to me that's starting to scream at my kids because they're in front of his house on the sidewalk. And he's making it over into my yard. It's getting closer and closer. He's getting bolder and bolder. And I'm about to take the guy out. And I said, you mean they're going to break a bone or bloodlet? And he goes, yes. And he had like 27 years total time in the service. And I said, he's got to be on your property. Yes. Where are the kids going to be when this occurs? And he said, nearby. And I said, you cannot let that happen. Your kids can't survive this. It could cause a divorce. It could cause anything. So you've got to move out of that house or figure out a way that your kids don't see it. And that's the end of your service. You do that and you're going to be gone out of the service with retirement. I recommend you retire immediately and become a civilian, bag your retirement, and get your kids out of the house and take it from there. Because you're going to survive it, but the law will not allow you to do it unless it's in your turf. And how far are you going to go? What do the laws say? But you got to get out of the service. So that's the only way I could, encapsulate it, not being a parent, saying that the parents cannot take that kind of memory. I mean, the reason there's PTSD is because of memories that the person says he can handle and then he can't handle it. And there's many cases where tough guys faint when they see a needle. And it's the same with PTSD. People say, yeah, I can do that kind of shit. Well, when the guy's got 3 distinguished flying crosses, he can do it, but that's not inherited. That could wipe people out if they see it. So that's
what did he do?
Nothing. Somehow I went through the whole gamut. I said, have you called the police? Yes. He's a repeat offender. He's an ex-con. He's screaming and yelling and there's no proof. I said, then put cameras together. And eventually he came in and he said, now I think that I'm in big trouble. This is gonna bust wide open. And I said, retire immediately. That's what I would do. And he went down and retired. He got out of the service. And after that, I don't know what happened.
Well, good session, guys.
Yeah, it was good. This is fun.
Yeah.
Good seeing y'all.
Yeah. You guys take care.
Okay. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.